You are born in the dense canopy of a Borneo rainforest, 40 feet above the ground, in a world that exists entirely in the trees. Your mother cradles you against her chest, her long arms wrapped protectively around your tiny body. You weigh barely a pound, and your face is nothing like what it will become. Right now, your nose is small and flat, almost human-like. You have no idea that one day it will grow into something so large and distinctive that humans will name your entire species after it. The first thing you notice is hunger. Your mother's milk is rich and warm, and you drink constantly. She never puts you down, never lets you out of her sight. This isn't helicopter parenting. This is survival. Below you stretches a network of branches and leaves, but beyond that lies a 100-foot drop to the forest floor. One wrong move, one moment of carelessness, and you become a meal for something with sharp teeth. Your family group is small, maybe 8 individuals total. There's your mother, obviously, but also your older siblings, a few aunts, and the dominant male who rules over everyone. He's massive compared to you, weighing nearly 50 pounds, with a nose so enormous it hangs down past his mouth. When he calls out across the forest, that nose amplifies his voice like a megaphone, sending his deep, honking sound echoing through the trees for miles. But you're not thinking about any of that yet. You're focused on staying warm and fed while your mother swings through the canopy with you clinging to her belly. She moves with incredible precision, grabbing branches with her long fingers, testing each one before putting her full weight on it. A broken branch means death, so she takes no chances. Her movements are fluid and calculated, each leap perfectly measured. The world around you is alive with sound. Birds call from every direction, insects buzz and click, and somewhere in the distance, another Proboscis monkey group is making their presence known. Your family responds with their own calls, a chorus of honks and grunts that you don't understand yet, but will learn to speak fluently. Your mother spends most of her day eating. She moves from tree to tree, selecting only the youngest, most tender leaves. Her stomach is enormous, taking up nearly a quarter of her body weight, because the leaves she eats are tough to digest. She needs a massive fermentation chamber to break them down, like a walking compost bin. You watch her carefully examine each leaf before eating it, rejecting anything that looks too old or might be toxic. Sometimes she'll pause to groom you, her fingers working through your thin fur, removing any debris and checking for parasites. It's not just hygiene, it's bonding. Every stroke of her fingers tells you that you're safe, that you belong, that someone is watching out for you. The dominant male keeps watch while the group feeds. His eyes constantly scan the surrounding trees, looking for threats. Clouded leopards hunt in these canopies, moving silently through the branches. They're perfectly adapted for this three-dimensional world, and a young proboscis monkey like you would make an easy target. But the male's vigilance and those amplified warning calls keep predators at bay. As days turn into weeks, you start to notice more about your surroundings. The forest is divided into territories, invisible boundaries that your family respects and defends. Sometimes you encounter other proboscis monkey groups at the edges of these territories. The meetings are tense. Males size each other up, making threatening displays with their mouths open, showing their impressive canine teeth. Usually, one group backs down before any real fighting begins. Violence is expensive in a world where a broken bone means death. Your grip strength develops quickly. It has to. Your fingers learn to lock around branches and your mother's fur with incredible force. Even while sleeping, you maintain that death grip. Letting go is not an option when you live this high above ground. Your feet are equally important. They work like a second set of hands, grabbing and holding with precision. The rainy season arrives with torrential downpours that soak through the canopy. Your mother huddles over you, using her body as a shield against the driving rain. Water streams off the leaves in waterfalls, and the air becomes thick with humidity. The group moves less during these storms, finding the most sheltered spots they can and waiting it out. Food becomes harder to find as many trees stop producing new growth, but your mother's milk sustains you through the worst of it. During this time, you start to notice something strange happening to your face. Your nose, which was once small and unremarkable, begins to grow. It's not dramatic at first, just a slight lengthening, a small increase in width. But it's the beginning of a transformation that will define your entire identity. Your mother's behavior toward you starts to shift slightly as you grow larger. She still carries you everywhere, but she's less protective when other family members approach. Your older siblings show interest in you now, sometimes reaching out to touch you or play gently. These interactions will teach you the social rules of Proboscis monkey society, who you can trust, who ranks where in the hierarchy, and how to read the subtle signals that prevent conflicts. The group's daily routine becomes familiar. They wake before dawn and immediately begin feeding, taking advantage of the cooler morning air. The hottest part of the day is spent resting in whatever shade they can find, grooming each other and dozing. Late afternoon brings another feeding session before the group settles in for the night, usually near water sources. Water is everywhere in this environment, but not all of it is safe to drink. Your mother knows which streams and pools are clean and which might harbor parasites or toxins. She teaches you by example, showing you where to drink and where to avoid. Sometimes the group will descend closer to the ground to reach better water sources, but these trips are brief and nervous. The ground belongs to different predators, pythons, crocodiles, and other threats that your family has no defense against. Your nose continues its steady growth, and with it comes changes in your voice. The simple squeaks and grunts of infancy develop into more complex sounds. You start experimenting with different calls, copying the adults around you. Your mother responds encouragingly to your attempts, reinforcing the sounds that are closest to proper proboscis monkey communication. Food becomes more interesting as you begin to sample solid items. Your mother shares pre-chewed leaves with you, not the most appetizing meal by human standards, but essential for developing your digestive system. The bacteria in her saliva help colonize your gut with the microorganisms you'll need to break down the tough plant material that makes up your species' diet. You discover that not all leaves are created equal. Some are sweet and tender, others bitter and tough. Your mother guides your choices, steering you away from anything that might harm you. Certain plants contain toxins that adult Proboscis monkeys can handle, but would be deadly to someone your size. Learning what to eat and what to avoid is literally a matter of life and death. The forest itself is a complex ecosystem that you're just beginning to understand. Different trees fruit at different times, creating a calendar of food availability that your family follows religiously. They know exactly when each species will produce its best leaves, which direction to travel for the sweetest fruits, and where to find water during the driest months. Your relationship with your mother remains the center of your world, but you're becoming aware of the larger social dynamics around you. The dominant male has absolute authority over the group's movements and decisions. When he decides it's time to move, everyone moves. When he chooses a feeding area, that's where the group feeds. His massive size and intimidating appearance keep rival males away and predators at a respectful distance. But dominance comes with responsibilities. He's the first to investigate any potential threats, the last to eat when food is scarce, and the one who makes the life or death decisions that keep everyone alive. It's not a position he can afford to take lightly. As your nose grows larger, you start to understand its importance beyond just making noise. The complex internal structure helps you process scents with incredible precision. You can smell the ripeness of fruit from hundreds of yards away, detect the presence of predators on the wind, and identify individual family members by their unique odors. Your nose is becoming a sophisticated sensory organ that will guide many of your decisions throughout your life. The wet season gradually gives way to drier conditions, and with the change comes new challenges. Food becomes more scattered, forcing the group to travel greater distances each day. Your mother's milk production starts to decrease as you grow larger and more independent. You're being weaned whether you like it or not. This transition isn't easy. You still want the comfort and security of nursing, but your mother becomes increasingly reluctant to provide it. She'll push you away gently at first, then more firmly if you persist. It's not cruelty, it's preparation for the independence you'll need to survive. Your play behavior becomes more sophisticated as your coordination improves. You chase your siblings through the branches, practice jumping between trees, and engage in mock wrestling matches that teach you important physical skills. These games look like simple fun, but they're actually intensive training sessions for the challenges ahead. The forest canopy is a three-dimensional maze that requires split-second timing and perfect spatial awareness. A miscalculation of distance, a failure to account for wind, or the flexibility of a branch, and you fall. Every game of chase, every playful leap, builds the muscle memory and judgment that will keep you alive. Your family's territory encompasses several square miles of prime rainforest, but it's not theirs alone. They share it with countless other species, each occupying its own niche in the complex ecosystem. You learn to recognize the warning calls of hornbills that might signal approaching predators. The rustling that means a python is moving through the branches above, and the subtle changes in forest sounds that indicate danger. But you also learn about the species that pose no threat, the colorful birds that flit through the canopy, the insects that buzz harmlessly past, and the smaller primates that sometimes feed in the same trees without conflict. Not everything in the forest is trying to kill you, but distinguishing between threats and harmless neighbors is a skill that takes time to develop. Your growing independence comes with new risks. As you venture further from your mother's side, you become responsible for your own safety in ways you never were before. Every branch you grab, every leap you make, every decision about where to go and what to eat carries consequences that are entirely yours to bear. Your nose has grown noticeably larger now, hanging down slightly past your upper lip. It's still nowhere near adult size, but it's enough to change how you sound when you call out. Your voice carries a deeper resonance, and the other monkeys in your group respond differently to your vocalizations. You're no longer just a baby making random noises. You're becoming a member of the community with something to say. The dominant male has started paying attention to you in ways he never did before, not because you're a threat, you're still far too small for that, but because you're approaching the age where social rules become important. He watches your interactions with other group members, especially when you get too rough during play or venture too close to his favorite feeding spots. A sharp grunt from him is enough to send you scrambling back to safer territory. Your mother's patience with your antics is wearing thin. She used to tolerate your climbing all over her while she tried to eat, but now she shrugs you off with increasing frequency. When you persist in demanding her attention, she might give you a light cuff or simply move away, leaving you to figure out your own entertainment. It's not rejection, it's education. You need to learn that the world doesn't revolve around your immediate wants. Food has become your primary concern. Your mother's milk is almost completely gone now, and solid food must sustain you entirely. But not just any solid food will do. Your digestive system is still developing, and many of the leaves that older monkeys can process easily would make you violently ill. You watch the adults carefully, noting which plants they choose and which they avoid, building a mental catalog of safe options. The learning process involves plenty of mistakes. You bite into a leaf that looks perfectly fine but tastes incredibly bitter, causing you to spit it out immediately while your mouth burns with an acrid flavor. Your mother doesn't rush to help, she just watches as you learn the hard way that appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the most dangerous plants are the ones that look the most appealing. Your climbing skills have improved dramatically, but the forest still holds plenty of surprises. A branch that looks sturdy might be rotted from the inside, breaking without warning under your weight. A vine that seems perfect for swinging might be home to stinging insects that don't appreciate being disturbed. Each near miss teaches you to be more cautious, more observant, more aware of the subtle signs that separate safe choices from potentially fatal ones. The rainy season returns with a vengeance, bringing floods that turn the forest floor into a temporary lake. Your group adapts by staying higher in the canopy, but even there, the constant moisture creates problems. Fungal infections can develop quickly in the humid conditions, and several group members develop persistent coughs that worry you even though you don't understand why. During one particularly violent storm, a massive tree crashes down nearby, taking several others with it in a domino effect of destruction. The sound is deafening, and the entire group freezes in terror as debris rains down around them. When the chaos finally stops, you realize how quickly everything you know could disappear. The forest might seem permanent and unchanging, but it's actually fragile and constantly shifting. Your social awareness has sharpened considerably. You can now read the subtle body language that indicates when the dominant male is in a bad mood, when your mother is getting annoyed with your behavior, or when another group member is about to make a sudden move. These skills aren't just useful for avoiding conflict. They're essential for predicting food opportunities, understanding group movements, and staying safe in a complex social environment. The group encounters another family of Proboscis monkeys at the edge of their territory. The meeting starts peacefully enough, with both groups maintaining a respectful distance while they size each other up. But tensions escalate quickly when a juvenile from the other group ventures too close to your family's feeding tree. The dominant males from both groups begin making threatening displays, their enormous noses amplifying their angry honks until the forest echoes with their challenges. You watch in fascination as the confrontation unfolds. Both males rear up on their hind legs, showing off their impressive size while making as much noise as possible. Their nose displays are particularly dramatic, inflating and deflating like biological loudspeakers as they broadcast their territorial claims. Neither wants to actually fight, but neither can afford to back down without losing face. The standoff continues for nearly an hour before the visiting group finally retreats, acknowledging your family's prior claim to the area. The dominant male maintains his aggressive posture until they're completely out of sight, then relaxes visibly, his nose returning to its normal size. The encounter taught you valuable lessons about the importance of territory, the power of intimidation, and the delicate balance that prevents most conflicts from turning violent. Your own nose continues its relentless growth, becoming more prominent with each passing week. Other young monkeys your age are experiencing the same changes, but at different rates. Some have noses that are growing faster than yours, while others lag behind. These differences will become increasingly important as you age, determining your place in the social hierarchy and your success in future mating competitions. The forest's seasonal rhythms have become familiar patterns in your life. You know when certain trees will fruit, when the rains will come, and when food will become scarce. But this knowledge comes with the sobering realization that survival depends on your ability to predict and adapt to these cycles. A miscalculation about when a food source will become available could mean starvation during lean times. Your mother has become noticeably less attentive to your needs. She still keeps an eye on you, but she no longer drops everything to respond to your calls. When you're hungry, you have to find your own food. When you're tired, you have to find your own comfortable spot to rest. When you're frightened, you have to manage your own fear. The safety net of constant maternal care is disappearing, forcing you to develop self-reliance. This transition is particularly challenging during encounters with predators. A clouded leopard appears in the canopy one afternoon, moving silently through the branches about 50 yards away. Your mother sees it immediately and gives a sharp warning call, but instead of gathering you close like she used to, she simply makes sure you've noticed the threat and then focuses on her own escape route. You're expected to be responsible for your own safety now. The leopard doesn't approach directly. It's hunting, not just exploring, and it knows that a group of alert proboscis monkeys will be difficult to catch. Instead, it moves parallel to your family's position, hoping to spot a weakness or an opportunity. You force yourself to remain perfectly still, fighting every instinct that tells you to flee. Movement would only attract the predator's attention. After what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes, the leopard moves on to hunt easier prey elsewhere. Your family remains motionless for several more minutes before the dominant male gives the all-clear signal. The encounter leaves you shaken, but also proud. You handled a life-threatening situation without panicking or making mistakes that could have endangered the entire group. Your diet has expanded to include a wider variety of plants, but you've learned that quantity doesn't always equal quality. Some leaves fill your stomach, but provide little nutrition, leaving you hungry again within hours. Others are so rich that eating too much causes digestive problems. Finding the right balance requires constant attention to your body's signals and careful observation of what other group members are eating. The dry season brings new challenges as water sources begin to disappear. The group must travel further each day to find adequate drinking water, and competition with other animals becomes more intense. At one watering hole, you encounter a family of orangutans who clearly consider the area their territory. The two species eye each other warily, neither willing to give ground until both groups eventually drink from opposite sides of the pool. Your relationship with your siblings has evolved as you've all grown larger and more independent. The playful roughhousing of early childhood has given way to more structured interactions based on emerging social hierarchies. Your older siblings now treat you with a mixture of tolerance and mild dominance, while you find yourself asserting authority over any younger group members. These power dynamics are constantly shifting as individual personalities develop and physical capabilities change. A sibling who was dominant last month might find themselves subordinate this month if another family member has grown faster or become more aggressive. Nothing is permanent in proboscis monkey society, except the need to constantly reassess your position relative to everyone else. Your growing independence has opened up new areas of the forest that were previously off limits. Your mother no longer restricts your movements as strictly, allowing you to explore branches and feeding areas that would have been too dangerous when you were smaller. But with this freedom comes the responsibility to make good decisions about risk versus reward. You discover a section of forest where the fruit trees are particularly abundant, but it's also uncomfortably close to the territory of another proboscis monkey group. The food is tempting, but feeding there would require constant vigilance for territorial disputes. You learn to weigh these factors carefully, understanding that the best feeding opportunities often come with the highest risks. The seasonal flooding returns more severe than previous years. Large sections of the forest floor disappear under muddy water, and several of your family's regular feeding trees become inaccessible. The group adapts by shifting their range to higher ground, but this brings them into conflict with other families who have made the same decision. Territory boundaries that were clear during normal conditions become disputed zones when everyone is competing for the same limited resources. Your nose has reached a size where it significantly affects your daily activities. It gets in the way when you're trying to eat certain foods, requires you to adjust your sleeping position, and changes the way you sound when you call out to other group members. But it also provides capabilities you never had before: enhanced scent detection, better vocal resonance, and a growing sense of identity as a proboscis monkey rather than just a generic primate. The approaching end of your juvenile period brings with it a growing awareness of adult responsibilities and challenges. You're no longer just a passenger in your family group. You're becoming a contributing member with your own role to play in the complex social dynamics that keep everyone alive. The carefree days of early childhood are ending, replaced by the more serious business of survival in an unforgiving environment. Your adolescence begins with a growth spurt that changes everything about how you move through the forest. Your limbs stretch longer, your grip becomes stronger, and your nose continues its relentless expansion. It's not just getting bigger, it's becoming more complex, developing the internal chambers and resonating structures that will define your adult voice. When you call out now, the sound carries further and deeper than ever before, announcing your presence to the entire forest. But with size comes new dangers. You're too big now to hide behind your mother when threats appear, too heavy for the smaller branches that once supported you, and too noticeable to predators who previously ignored you as insignificant. A young adult proboscis monkey occupies an uncomfortable middle ground, no longer protected by the immunity of childhood, but not yet powerful enough to command respect. Your relationship with the dominant male becomes increasingly tense. He tolerates your presence, but barely. When you venture too close to his preferred feeding spots, his warning grunts carry a sharper edge than they used to. You're approaching the age where you could theoretically challenge his authority, and he knows it. Every interaction between you is now loaded with the potential for conflict. Excuse, your mother has essentially cut you loose. She acknowledges your existence with the casual indifference reserved for distant relatives. When you approach her for comfort, after a particularly frightening encounter with a snake, she looks through you as if you're a stranger. The message is clear: you're on your own now. Her energy and attention have shifted to a new infant clinging to her chest, your replacement. The sight of your baby sibling triggers complex emotions you don't fully understand. Part of you feels protective, remembering your own vulnerability at that age, but another part resents the attention and care being lavished on someone else. You watch your mother groom the infant, with the same gentle dedication she once showed you, and something twists in your chest. Those days are gone forever. Food competition becomes brutal during the lean months. The adult males eat first, claiming the choicest leaves and ripest fruits, while everyone else waits. Your size puts you in an awkward position, too big to be fed by adults, but not dominant enough to claim the best resources. You learn to be opportunistic, grabbing what you can when the higher ranking monkeys are distracted. One afternoon, you discover a tree loaded with perfectly ripe figs at the edge of your territory. It's a magnificent find, enough food to sustain you for days. But as you reach for the first cluster, a sharp honk freezes you in place. The dominant male has spotted your discovery and wants it for himself. You have a choice: surrender the food and go hungry, or stand your ground and face the consequences. Every instinct screams at you to back down. He outweighs you by 30 pounds. His canine teeth are twice the size of yours, and his nose can amplify his threatening calls to deafening levels. But hunger makes you bold, and adolescent hormones flood your system with reckless courage. You plant your feet and honk back, your voice cracking embarrassingly in the middle of your challenge. The confrontation escalates quickly. He displays his full size, rearing up on his hind legs, while his nose inflates to maximum volume. His calls shake the branches around you, and every other monkey in the area stops what they're doing to watch. You try to match his display, but your nose is still growing, and your voice lacks the deep resonance of full maturity. You sound like a squeaky teenager trying to threaten a grown man. He doesn't attack immediately. Instead, he advances slowly, giving you multiple chances to back down with some dignity intact. But pride and hunger keep your feet planted. You've committed to this course of action, and retreating now would mark you as weak in front of the entire group, so you hold your ground even as terror floods your system. When he finally strikes, it's faster than you expected. His massive hand slams into your chest, sending you tumbling backward through the branches. You scramble to regain your footing, but he's already there, looming over you with his mouth open in a threat display that reveals those impressive canine teeth. One bite from those weapons would end your life instantly. This time, you make the smart choice. You drop your gaze, fold your body into a submissive posture, and back away from the fig tree. He watches you retreat with satisfaction, then settles in to enjoy the feast you discovered. The lesson is clear. In Proboscis Monkey Society, might makes right, and you don't have enough might yet. The humiliation burns, but it also teaches you valuable lessons about picking your battles. Not every confrontation is worth the risk, and sometimes strategic retreat is the wisest option. You file away the memory of those figs and the location of that tree. Someday, when you're bigger and stronger, you'll remember this moment. Your social status within the group solidifies during these months. You're neither child nor adult, neither leader nor follower, but something uncomfortably in between. The younger monkeys look up to you, but you have little authority over them. The adults acknowledge your existence, but don't consider you particularly important. You exist in a social limbo that won't resolve until you either leave the group or challenge for dominance. The wet season brings relief from food competition, but introduces new problems. The constant rain makes travel difficult and dangerous, turning normally reliable branches into slippery hazards. You watch a cousin lose his grip during a routine crossing and plummet 40 feet to the forest floor. The sickening crack of breaking bones echoes through the canopy, followed by silence. He doesn't get back up. The incident affects you more than you expected. Death has always been an abstract concept, something that happened to other monkeys in other places. But seeing someone you knew disappear in an instant brings your own mortality into sharp focus. Every branch you grab, every leap you make, every decision about where to sleep carries the potential for disaster. Your nose has grown large enough to interfere with your eating. Certain fruits require you to tilt your head at awkward angles to get around the obstruction, and drinking water becomes a careful balancing act to avoid drowning in your own appendage. But the enhanced scent detection more than compensates for these inconveniences. You can smell ripe fruits from incredible distances, detect the approach of predators long before they become visible, and identify individual group members by their unique odors. The dry season tests everyone's survival skills as water sources dwindle to muddy pools shared with increasingly desperate animals. At one watering hole, you encounter a massive python coiled around a branch just above the water's surface. It's not hunting, just resting, but its presence turns a simple drink into a terrifying ordeal. You force yourself to move slowly and quietly, knowing that sudden movements might trigger a strike. Other dangers lurk everywhere during these harsh months. Stressed animals become more aggressive. Territorial boundaries shift as groups compete for dwindling resources, and weakened individuals fall prey to predators that would normally avoid healthy proboscis monkeys. You learn to read the subtle signs of desperation in other animals' behavior, understanding that a hungry leopard is far more dangerous than a well-fed one. Your growing independence allows you to explore areas of the forest that were previously forbidden, but it also removes the safety net of constant supervision. When you venture too far from the group one afternoon and lose track of their movements, panic sets in quickly. The forest suddenly seems enormous and hostile, full of sounds you can't identify and smells that might indicate danger. You spend hours searching for familiar scent trails, calling out desperately and hoping for a response. The silence that greets your calls is terrifying. Being alone in the forest means vulnerability to every predator, exposure to every danger, and no backup if things go wrong. When you finally hear the distant honking of your family group, relief floods through you like a physical sensation. The reunion is less emotional than you hoped. The other monkeys acknowledge your return with casual indifference, as if your absence was barely noticed. Your mother glances in your direction, but shows no sign of concern or relief. The message is clear. If you choose to wander off, the consequences are yours to bear. Nobody will come looking for you if you get lost again. Your relationship with your siblings continues to evolve as everyone matures at different rates. A brother who was smaller and weaker than you just months ago has suddenly shot up in size, his nose growing faster than yours, his voice deepening more quickly. The casual dominance you once enjoyed over him evaporates overnight as he tests his new strength against yours. The challenge comes during a dispute over a particularly sweet cluster of young leaves. You reach for them first, but he blocks your access with his body, honking a warning that carries new authority. His nose has grown large enough to give his calls real resonance, and his increased size makes his threat displays genuinely intimidating. When you try to push past him, he shoves back with enough force to send you sprawling. The reversal of your relationship stings more than the physical confrontation. Growing up means watching others grow faster, stronger, and more successful while you struggle to keep pace. Your own development feels sluggish by comparison, your nose growing in disappointing increments, while others seem to transform overnight into impressive adults. But growth spurts come at different times for different individuals, and your turn arrives with startling suddenness. Over the course of just a few weeks, your body stretches taller, your muscles fill out, and your nose expands dramatically. The change is so rapid that you struggle to adjust to your new proportions, misjudging distances and bumping into branches that would have cleared your old profile easily. The transformation brings new respect from other group members. Your calls now carry the deep resonance of approaching maturity, and your threat displays look genuinely formidable rather than merely cute. When you honk a warning, other monkeys actually pay attention instead of dismissing you as an irrelevant juvenile. Your appetite explodes along with your growth, requiring you to spend even more time foraging just to meet your body's demands. The leaves that once satisfied you for hours now barely take the edge off your hunger. You learn to be more selective, targeting the most nutritious plants and avoiding low-quality filler that would waste precious stomach space. The forest's seasonal cycles have become as familiar as your own heartbeat. You know which trees will fruit when, where to find water during the driest months, and how to predict weather changes from subtle shifts in animal behavior. This knowledge represents years of accumulated survival wisdom, passed down through observation and hard-won experience. Your territory has expanded significantly as your confidence grows. Areas that once seemed impossibly remote now fall within your regular patrol range. You know every major tree, every reliable water source, and every potential danger zone within several square miles of forest. This mental map will serve you well when the time comes to strike out on your own. The dominant male's tolerance for your presence continues to decrease as you approach full maturity. His threat displays become more frequent and more intense, warning you away from prime feeding areas and choice sleeping spots. The message is becoming impossible to ignore. There isn't room in this group for two adult males, and he was here first. Your mother produces another infant, her third since your birth. The sight of her nursing and grooming the newcomer triggers a complex mix of emotions: nostalgia for your own lost innocence, jealousy over the attention being lavished on someone else, and a growing understanding that your childhood is truly over. You're no longer anyone's baby, no longer anyone's primary concern. The group's social dynamics shift subtly as you occupy more adult space within the hierarchy. Younger monkeys defer to you now, moving aside when you approach good feeding spots and falling silent when you vocalize. But this newfound respect comes with responsibilities. You're expected to contribute to group defense, to help watch for predators, and to support the dominant male's decisions even when you disagree with them. An encounter with rival group tests your loyalty and courage. The territorial dispute erupts suddenly when both families arrive at the same fruiting tree simultaneously. Neither group is willing to back down, and the situation escalates quickly into a full-scale confrontation. The dominant males face off while their supporters arrange themselves for battle. You find yourself in the front ranks, honking aggressively at the opposing forces while trying to look larger and more threatening than you feel. Your nose amplifies your calls effectively now, adding your voice to the chorus of territorial claims echoing through the forest. But you're also acutely aware that if this display fails and actual fighting breaks out, you'll be expected to participate fully. The standoff lasts for over an hour, with both sides making increasingly dramatic threats while carefully avoiding actual violence. Finally, the visiting group retreats, acknowledging your family's prior claim to the area. The victory feels hollow. You spent the entire confrontation terrified that someone would call your bluff and force you to back up your aggressive display with actual combat. Your nose reaches nearly adult proportions during your second year of life. The massive appendage dominates your face now, hanging down past your mouth and requiring constant adjustment of your eating and drinking techniques. But it also provides capabilities that justify its awkward size. Your scent detection has become incredibly sophisticated. Your vocal calls carry for miles, and your threat displays look genuinely impressive. The approaching end of your adolescence brings with it a growing awareness that major life changes are coming. You can't remain in your birth group much longer without challenging the dominant male for control, and you're not ready for that level of confrontation. The alternative is dispersal, leaving everything familiar behind to search for your own territory and your own social group. The thought of leaving terrifies you. This forest, this family, these daily routines represent everything you've ever known. Beyond the boundaries of your territory lies an unknown world full of unfamiliar dangers and uncertain opportunities. But staying means inevitable conflict with the dominant male, a confrontation you're likely to lose. Your relationship with your family members becomes more strained as they sense your approaching departure. Your mother treats you with increasing indifference. Your siblings maintain careful distance, and even the younger monkeys seem less eager to interact with you. It's as if everyone understands that you're becoming an outsider, someone who no longer fully belongs in this group. The dominant male's hostility reaches new levels during your final months in the group. He shadows your movements constantly, interrupting your feeding attempts and challenging your presence in prime locations. His message is clear: leave voluntarily or be driven out by force. Every day you remain increases the likelihood of a violent confrontation that could leave you badly injured or dead. The seasonal rains arrive early, turning the forest floor into a temporary lake and forcing all the primates higher into the canopy. The increased crowding leads to more frequent conflicts over space and resources. Tempers run short when everyone is confined to a smaller area, and minor disputes escalate quickly into serious confrontations. During one particularly violent storm, a massive tree crashes down nearby, its fall triggering a cascade of destruction that reshapes an entire section of forest. The sound is deafening, and debris rains down for several minutes after the initial impact. When the chaos finally stops, you realize how quickly everything you know could disappear. The forest might seem permanent, but it's actually fragile and constantly changing. Your final major confrontation with the dominant male comes over access to a tree loaded with ripe fruit. You arrive first and begin feeding, but his angry honking soon echoes through the canopy. This time, however, you don't immediately back down. Your nose has grown large enough to amplify your own calls effectively. Your body has filled out with adult muscle, and adolescent hormones flood your system with aggressive confidence. The face-off is intense but brief. He displays his full authority, rearing up to his maximum height, while his enormous nose broadcasts threats that shake the surrounding branches. You respond with your own display, matching his aggression with calls that carry surprising depth and resonance. For a moment, it seems like you might actually challenge him successfully, but experience trumps size and enthusiasm. His attack comes without warning, a lightning-fast strike that sends you tumbling through the branches before you can react. You hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of your lungs, and your pride shattered along with several minor bones. He looms over you, his threat display unmistakable in its meaning. Next time, he won't stop at a warning. You drag yourself away from the confrontation, body aching and spirit broken. The message couldn't be clearer. There's no future for you in this group. You can leave on your own terms, or you can be driven out through increasingly violent encounters. Either way, your time here is over. The realization that you must leave everything familiar behind hits you like a physical blow. This forest, these monkeys, these daily routines have been your entire world. Beyond the boundaries of your territory lies unknown terrain filled with unfamiliar dangers and uncertain opportunities. But staying means certain conflict, probable injury, and possible death. Your last few days with the group pass in a haze of preparation and farewell. You memorize the locations of the best feeding trees, the most reliable water sources, and the safest sleeping spots. You observe the social dynamics one final time, noting how disputes are resolved and alliances are maintained. All of this knowledge will serve you well when you're forced to navigate similar situations in unfamiliar territory. The morning of your departure arrives with no fanfare or ceremony. You simply wake up, take one last look around the forest that raised you, and begin moving toward the boundary of your family's territory. Behind you, the group continues their daily routine as if nothing has changed. Your mother feeds her latest infant without glancing in your direction. Your siblings groom each other and play their familiar games. The dominant male patrols his domain with satisfied authority. Nobody tries to stop you. Nobody calls out in farewell. Your departure is noted but not mourned, acknowledged but not protested. You are simply another young male following the ancient pattern of dispersal that has shaped Proboscis monkey society for millions of years. This is how it has always been, and how it will always be. As you cross the invisible boundary that marks the edge of everything you've ever known, fear and excitement wars in your chest. Behind you lies safety, familiarity, and subordination. Ahead lies danger, uncertainty, and the possibility of creating your own destiny. You are no longer a juvenile proboscis monkey dependent on family protection. You are an adult male setting out to claim his place in the world. The forest stretches endlessly ahead of you, filled with opportunities and threats in equal measure. Somewhere out there is territory you can claim as your own, females you might win as mates, and a future you will build with your own hands. But first, you must survive the dangerous journey between your past and your potential future. Your nose twitches as unfamiliar scents fill your nostrils. These are the smells of foreign territory, unknown dangers, and unlimited possibilities. You take a deep breath, square your shoulders, and begin the long journey toward whatever destiny awaits you in the vast green wilderness ahead. The first few hours of traveling alone feel surreal. Every sound makes you freeze. Every shadow could hide a predator, and every branch creaks under your weight with what seems like deafening volume. You've never been this far from familiar territory, and the forest around you looks subtly different. The trees are spaced differently, the undergrowth is thicker, and even the quality of light filtering through the canopy seems strange. Your stomach growls with increasing urgency as the day wears on. Back home, you knew exactly where to find the tastiest leaves, which trees produce the sweetest fruits, and when each food source would be at its peak ripeness. Here, everything is a gamble. You spot a tree heavy with what looks like edible fruit, but appearances can be deceiving. One wrong choice could leave you violently ill or worse. You decide to test a small piece first, chewing it carefully and waiting for any signs of toxicity. The taste is bitter, but not immediately alarming. After 20 minutes with no adverse effects, you risk eating more. It's not the best meal you've ever had, but it fills the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. Finding food will be a constant challenge until you learn the resources of whatever territory you eventually claim. A distant honking freezes you in place. Other proboscis monkeys are nearby, but you have no idea whether they're potential allies or threats. In your birth group, you knew everyone's personality, their place in the hierarchy, and how they were likely to react in any given situation. These strangers are complete unknowns. They might welcome a newcomer, or they might attack on sight to defend their territory. You climb higher into the canopy, to get a better view of the surrounding area. Through the leaves, you spot movement about 200 yards away, a small group of Proboscis monkeys moving through the trees with purposeful coordination. There are maybe 6 individuals, led by a massive male whose nose dwarfs even your father's impressive appendage. His calls echo across the forest with authority that makes your own vocalizations sound like whispered suggestions. The smart move is to avoid them entirely. You're not ready for a confrontation, and they have no reason to be friendly to a strange male invading their space. You alter your course to give them a wide berth, but the detour adds hours to your journey and takes you into even more unfamiliar terrain. This is the price of survival as a solitary male. Every decision involves trade-offs between safety and efficiency. As evening approaches, you face your first night alone in the wilderness. Choosing a sleeping spot requires careful consideration of multiple factors. Too low, and ground predators might reach you. Too high, and you risk falling if you lose your grip during sleep. Too exposed, and you become an easy target for aerial hunters. Too hidden, and you might not see threats approaching until it's too late. You settle on a thick branch about 30 feet up, surrounded by enough foliage to provide some concealment, but with clear escape routes in multiple directions. The bark is rough enough to provide good grip, even if your hands relax during sleep. It's not comfortable, but comfort is a luxury you can't afford right now. Sleep comes fitfully, interrupted by every sound the nocturnal forest produces. An owl calls in the distance, and you jolt awake wondering if it might be signaling your location to other predators. A branch creaks nearby, and you're instantly alert, scanning for movement in the darkness. The familiar sounds of your home territory have been replaced by an alien symphony that keeps your nerves on edge all night. Dawn brings relief from the psychological pressure of nighttime vulnerability, but it also reveals new challenges. Your water supplies are running low, and you need to find a reliable source soon. Dehydration can kill faster than starvation, and the dry season is approaching. You remember watching your father locate water by following certain bird calls and observing the flight patterns of insects. But implementing that knowledge on your own proves more difficult than expected. You eventually locate a small stream winding through a valley between 2 ridges. The water looks clean, but you approach cautiously. Streams attract all kinds of animals, including predators that might be hunting near the water's edge. A python could be coiled among the roots at the water's edge, perfectly camouflaged and waiting for thirsty prey to come within striking distance. After observing the area for 20 minutes without detecting any obvious threats, you descend carefully to drink. The water is cool and sweet, better than anything you remember from your birth territory. You drink deeply, knowing that you might not find another source for days, but as you lift your head, movement on the opposite bank catches your attention. It's another proboscis monkey, but this one is different, smaller, with a more delicate build and proportionally smaller nose. Female. She's drinking from the same stream, apparently as wary of you as you are of her. For a long moment, you stare at each other across the narrow waterway, neither sure what to do next. She's beautiful in a way that makes your chest tighten with unfamiliar emotions. Her movements are graceful and confident, suggesting she knows this area well. More importantly, she's alone, which means she's either temporarily separated from her group, or like you, seeking new social connections. The possibility that she might be available sends hormones flooding through your system, but approaching her requires delicate handling. Move too fast, and she'll flee. Act too aggressively, and she might call for help from a nearby group you haven't noticed. Show too much interest, and you could trigger defensive reactions that turn a potential mating opportunity into a violent confrontation. Female proboscis monkeys are choosy about their partners, and for good reason. Their reproductive success depends on selecting males who can provide protection and resources. You decide on a subtle approach, continuing to drink while stealing glances in her direction. She does the same, evaluating you with the careful attention of someone making an important decision. Your nose is impressive for your age. Your body shows the robust health of successful foraging, and your behavior suggests confidence without aggression. These are all positive signs from her perspective. She finishes drinking first and moves a short distance upstream, but she doesn't leave the area entirely. Instead, she begins grooming herself in full view, a behavior that could be interpreted as either casual maintenance or deliberate display. You choose to interpret it optimistically and move closer, but not directly toward her. Instead, you parallel her movements, maintaining distance while demonstrating your interest. The courtship dance continues for over an hour. She moves, you follow at a respectful distance. You vocalize softly. She responds with non-threatening calls. Gradually, the gap between you narrows as mutual trust develops. She's giving you opportunities to prove your intentions are romantic rather than territorial. When you finally work up the courage to cross the stream, she doesn't flee. Instead, she watches your approach with alert interest, ready to escape if you make any threatening moves. You keep your body language as non-aggressive as possible. No threat displays, no dominant posturing, no sudden movements that might trigger her flight response. The moment of truth comes when you're close enough to touch. She could accept your advances, or she could reject them violently. Female proboscis monkeys are perfectly capable of defending themselves against unwanted male attention, and their teeth are sharp enough to cause serious injury. Everything depends on whether she finds you acceptable as a potential mate. She doesn't run. Instead, she allows you to approach within arm's reach, her body language suggesting cautious acceptance rather than fear or aggression. When you reach out tentatively to touch her arm, she doesn't flinch away. The contact sends electricity through your nervous system, your first intimate physical interaction with a potential mate. What follows is a careful negotiation conducted entirely through touch and body language. She allows certain liberties while firmly rejecting others, teaching you the boundaries of acceptable behavior. You learn that she has preferences about how and where she likes to be touched, that she expects gentle treatment rather than rough handling, and that she's evaluating your performance as much as enjoying the interaction. The mating itself is brief but intense, a culmination of hours of careful courtship and mutual evaluation. When it's over, she doesn't immediately flee as you half expected. Instead, she remains nearby, grooming herself and occasionally glancing in your direction. The message seems to be that while she's not committing to a long-term relationship, she's not ruling out future encounters either. You part ways as the sun begins to set, but not before she's communicated through subtle signals where she might be found in the coming days. It's not a promise, but it's hope. For the first time since leaving your birth group, you feel like this exile might lead to something positive rather than merely being about survival. The encounter energizes you in ways you didn't expect. Your movements become more confident, your calls carry new authority, and your exploration of the surrounding forest takes on purpose beyond simple survival. You're not just looking for food and shelter anymore. You're evaluating territory with an eye toward establishing something permanent. Over the following days, you begin to understand the geography of your new home range. This section of forest is different from your birthplace in subtle but important ways. The trees are older and larger, creating a canopy so thick that little sunlight reaches the ground. The understory is more open as a result, making ground travel easier, but also more dangerous due to reduced cover. The animal community is different too. You encounter species that were rare or absent in your original territory, different birds, unfamiliar insects, and mammals you don't recognize. Some pose obvious threats, while others seem harmless. Learning to distinguish between dangerous and benign creatures will take time and careful observation. Water is more abundant here, with several streams converging into a small river that provides reliable hydration year-round. The increased moisture supports different plant communities, including several species of trees that produce particularly nutritious leaves and fruits. If you can establish territory rights to this area, you'll have access to resources that could support not just yourself, but potentially a family group. But claiming territory requires more than just wanting it. Other proboscis monkeys have prior claims to the best areas, and they won't give them up without a fight. You begin to map the boundaries of existing territories by following scent trails and listening to territorial calls. The picture that emerges is complex, a patchwork of claimed and unclaimed areas, with some boundaries clearly established and others apparently in dispute. Your best opportunity seems to lie in a section of forest that borders several established territories, but doesn't clearly belong to any of them. It's not the choicest real estate. The trees are younger, the food sources less reliable, and the water access more limited, but it's available, and possession is 9/10 of the law in Proboscis monkey society. You begin the process of establishing your claim through scent marking and vocal displays. Every morning, you patrol the boundaries of your chosen territory, leaving scent marks on prominent trees and calling out your ownership claims. The work is exhausting and repetitive, but it's essential for establishing your presence in the local community. The responses from neighboring males are mixed. Some acknowledge your claims with indifferent acceptance. You're not threatening their core territories, so they don't care what you do in the marginal areas. Others respond with aggressive countercalls, warning you that they consider your chosen territory to be within their sphere of influence. A few ignore you entirely, either because they haven't noticed your presence or because they don't consider you worth worrying about. Your most serious challenge comes from an older male whose territory borders yours along a crucial water access point. He's been established in this area for years, and he clearly considers the stream to be his exclusive property. When you approach for your morning drink, his warning calls echo across the forest with unmistakable hostility. The confrontation is inevitable. He can't allow you to use his water source without challenging his overall territorial claims, and you can't establish a viable territory without reliable access to water. When diplomacy fails, the dispute will have to be settled through displays of strength and dominance. He appears on the opposite bank like a vengeful spirit, his massive form dwarfing yours, even at a distance of 50 yards. His nose is enormous even by proboscis monkey standards, and the calls it produces shake the surrounding trees with their volume and intensity. He's clearly been the dominant male in this area for some time, and he has no intention of sharing power with an upstart newcomer. Your own threat display feels inadequate by comparison, but you give it everything you have. Your nose inflates to its maximum size as you broadcast your own territorial claims across the forest. Your voice has deepened considerably since leaving your birth group, and the calls carry farther than they used to. You rear up to your full height, showing off your adult musculature and trying to look as formidable as possible. The standoff continues for over an hour, with both of you escalating your displays without quite crossing the line into actual violence. He has the advantage of size and experience, but you have the desperation of youth and the energy that comes from having everything to gain and nothing to lose. Neither of you wants to fight if it can be avoided. Physical confrontations risk injury that could prove fatal in the wilderness. Eventually, a compromise emerges through subtle negotiations conducted entirely through body language and vocal tone. He maintains his claim to the primary water access point, but acknowledges your right to drink there during certain hours when he's not present. It's not ideal, but it's workable. You've established yourself as a legitimate territorial neighbor rather than a trespassing vagrant. The agreement opens the door to more normal relations with other established males in the area. Word of your successful negotiation spreads through the local Proboscis monkey community, carried by the intricate network of calls that connects all the territorial holders. You're no longer an unknown quantity. You're a recognized member of the neighborhood with rights and responsibilities that come with that status. Your territory gradually takes shape as you explore its boundaries and catalog its resources. The food sources are adequate, if not spectacular. Several fig trees that fruit at different times of year, patches of tender young leaves that regrow quickly after feeding, and access to various seasonal treats that supplement your basic diet. It's not the richest territory in the forest, but it's yours. The female you encountered at the stream becomes a regular visitor as your relationship develops. She doesn't live with you. Female proboscis monkeys maintain their independence even after mating, but she spends increasing amounts of time within your territory. Her presence attracts other females who come to evaluate both your resources and your worthiness as a potential mate. Competition for female attention proves to be more complex than the simple territorial disputes between males. Females have their own preferences and standards, and they're not shy about expressing them. Some are attracted to males with the largest noses, others prefer younger males with more energy, and still others seem to value territory quality over personal characteristics. You learn to read the subtle signals that indicate female interest or rejection. A particular way of positioning the body suggests receptiveness, while a different posture communicates clear disinterest. Grooming behaviors can be invitations to closer contact or simply maintenance activities with no romantic implications. Misreading these signals can lead to embarrassing rejections or even aggressive responses. Your relationship with your original female companion deepens as you prove your reliability and competence. She begins to trust you with information about local food sources, warns you about approaching predators, and even assists in territorial disputes by adding her voice to your calls. It's not quite a pair bond in the human sense, but it's a meaningful partnership based on mutual benefit and growing affection. The dry season tests your territorial management skills as water sources begin to dwindle. Your negotiated access to the mainstream becomes more valuable as smaller sources dry up entirely. The older male who controls that territory watches your usage carefully, ready to revoke your privileges if you abuse them or if water becomes too scarce to share. Food becomes scarcer too, as many trees stop producing new growth in response to the drought. You're forced to range farther from your core territory to find adequate nutrition, bringing you into contact with other males who are facing the same challenges. Competition intensifies as everyone struggles to find enough resources to survive the harsh months ahead. Your female companion disappears for several days during the worst of the dry season, leaving you wondering if she's found better resources elsewhere or simply decided that your territory isn't worth the investment. When she returns, she's accompanied by two other females who seem to be evaluating your setup with critical eyes. Their presence suggests that your stock is rising in the local social hierarchy. The arrival of the rainy season brings relief from resource scarcity, but introduces new challenges. Your territory, which seemed perfectly adequate during dry conditions, reveals drainage problems that turn several prime feeding areas into muddy swamps. You're forced to adjust your ranging patterns and find alternative food sources while the worst affected areas recover. Flooding forces you and your female companions to retreat to higher ground, compressing your effective territory and bringing you into closer contact with neighboring males. Tensions rise as everyone competes for the limited dry areas suitable for feeding and sleeping. Several minor territorial disputes erupt as boundaries become unclear in the transformed landscape. Your nose reaches full adult size during this period, the final stage of your physical maturation. The massive appendage now dominates your face, hanging down past your chin and requiring constant adjustment of your feeding and drinking techniques. But it also provides capabilities that justify its awkward bulk. Your calls now carry for miles. Your scent detection rivals that of any male in the area, and your threat displays look genuinely intimidating. The enhanced vocal abilities that come with your fully developed nose allow you to participate more effectively in the long-distance communication network that connects all the territorial males in the region. Morning call sessions become elaborate negotiations about boundaries, resource access, and social status. Your voice is now distinctive enough that other males can identify you individually, adding a personal dimension to these territorial discussions. Your relationship with your primary female companion evolves into something approaching a long-term partnership. She spends most of her time within your territory now, has learned the locations of all your best food sources, and actively participates in territorial defense by adding her voice to confrontations with intruders. When she becomes pregnant, the stakes of your territorial success increase dramatically. Protecting a pregnant female requires enhanced vigilance and more aggressive defense of resources. She needs additional nutrition to support the developing infant, and she becomes less mobile as her pregnancy progresses. Predators that might normally avoid healthy adult proboscis monkeys might see a pregnant female as a more vulnerable target worth pursuing. Your territorial boundaries become more rigidly enforced as you prepare for the arrival of offspring. Trespassing that you might have previously ignored now triggers immediate and aggressive responses. Other males in the area take note of your increased aggression and adjust their own behavior accordingly. Some respect your obvious commitment to defending your territory, while others see it as a challenge to their own status. The birth of your first offspring transforms your understanding of what's at stake in these forest politics. The tiny infant, clinging to its mother's chest, represents the future of your genetic line, the culmination of all your struggles to establish territory and attract mates. Every decision you make now affects not just your own survival, but the survival of your family. Your female companion's maternal instincts kick in immediately after the birth, making her more cautious about ranging far from safe areas and more selective about food choices. She relies on your territorial knowledge to guide her to the safest feeding spots and the most reliable water sources. The responsibility of supporting a nursing mother adds new pressure to your resource management. Other females in the area take notice of your successful reproduction, viewing it as evidence of your genetic quality and territorial competence. Several approach to evaluate you as a potential mate, leading to complex negotiations about access to your resources and your time. Proboscis monkey society allows for polygamous relationships, but managing multiple female companions requires diplomatic skills you're still developing. Your territory expands gradually as you gain confidence and experience. Marginal areas that you once avoided become incorporated into your regular patrol routes. Some expansion comes through negotiation with neighboring males, while other gains result from taking over territories abandoned by males who died or moved away. Each addition requires careful integration into your existing resource management strategy. The local proboscis monkey community has stabilized around your presence as a permanent territorial holder. Young males dispersing from their birth groups sometimes challenge your boundaries, but they're usually inexperienced and relatively easy to discourage. Older males treat you with the respect due to an established neighbor, even when they disagree with your territorial claims. Your second female companion becomes pregnant, just as your first offspring is beginning to explore independently. Managing the needs of multiple females at different stages of reproduction tests your multitasking abilities and resource allocation skills. Each female has her own preferences about food, territory usage, and social interactions, requiring you to maintain complex mental maps of their individual needs. The forest around your territory continues to change as seasons cycle and years pass. Trees that were young when you first arrived have grown larger and begun producing more food. Others have died and fallen, opening up new areas to sunlight and altering the local ecosystem. Your mental map of resources requires constant updating as these changes reshape the landscape. Predator populations fluctuate in response to prey availability and environmental conditions. A particularly successful breeding season for clouded leopards makes tree travel more dangerous for several months. Python numbers increase following a boom in their preferred prey species, requiring extra caution around water sources and sleeping areas. Staying alive requires constant adaptation to these shifting threat levels. Your growing family brings new joys and new anxieties. Watching your offspring learn to navigate the forest canopy triggers protective instincts you never knew you possessed. When a young leopard appears near one of your feeding trees, your response is immediate and overwhelming. You don't just retreat, you actively attack, driving the predator away through sheer aggression and determination. The success of your territorial establishment attracts attention from proboscis monkey researchers studying the area. They begin including your territory in their survey routes, documenting your family structure and resource usage patterns. Their presence is initially alarming, but you gradually become accustomed to being observed by creatures who seem interested but pose no obvious threat. Your original female companion has become pregnant for the second time, demonstrating the long-term success of your partnership. Her familiarity with your territory and resources makes her pregnancy easier to manage than the first time. She knows exactly where to find the most nutritious foods, the safest sleeping spots, and the most reliable water sources within your range. The local territorial system reaches a stable equilibrium as all the established males settle into predictable patterns of resource use and boundary maintenance. Conflicts become less frequent as everyone learns to respect established claims and negotiate access to shared resources. Your position within this community is secure, based on years of successful territorial defense and productive relationships with multiple females. Young males continue to disperse through the area, seeking territories of their own. Some challenge your boundaries directly, leading to confrontations that test your continued dominance. Others attempt to establish territories in marginal areas, creating new dynamics in the local community structure. Your responses to these challenges help establish precedents for how territorial disputes will be handled in the future. Your nose has reached its maximum size and effectiveness, making you one of the most vocally impressive males in the region. Morning call sessions showcase your vocal abilities as you participate in the complex negotiations that maintain peace between territorial neighbors. Your distinctive voice is now recognized across miles of forest, carrying information about your health, territorial claims, and social status. The forest ecosystem continues its endless cycles of growth, death, and renewal around your established territory. Trees that provided crucial resources during your early years eventually die and fall, forcing you to adapt your ranging patterns and find alternative food sources. New trees mature to replace them, but the transition periods require careful resource management to avoid nutritional stress. Your family has grown to include offspring of various ages, from newly weaned juveniles to adolescents approaching dispersal age. Managing the needs of this extended family requires sophisticated planning and resource allocation. Each individual has different nutritional requirements, different levels of independence, and different relationships with the females who gave birth to them. The success of your territorial establishment has made you a target for younger males seeking to improve their own status. Some approach with aggressive challenges, hoping to take over your prime real estate through force. Others attempt more subtle infiltration, trying to establish secondary territories within your boundaries. Your responses to these challenges determine whether your territory remains intact or becomes fragmented among multiple holders. Your relationship with your original female companion has evolved into a deep partnership based on years of shared experience and mutual support. She knows your territory as well as you do, participates actively in its defense, and has proven her value as a mother and resource manager. The bond between you represents one of the most successful pair relationships in the local Proboscis monkey community. The dry season brings its familiar challenges, but your years of experience have taught you how to manage resources effectively during lean times. You've identified alternative food sources that remain productive when primary trees stop producing, located reliable water sources that persist through the driest months, and established relationships with neighboring males that allow for resource sharing when necessary. Your territory has become a model of successful proboscis monkey land management, supporting multiple females and their offspring while maintaining healthy populations of food trees and reliable access to water. Younger males studying your setup before attempting to establish their own territories often spend time observing your ranging patterns and resource utilization strategies. The local research team has documented your territory as one of the most stable and productive in their study area. Their data shows consistent population growth, successful reproduction, and effective resource management over multiple years. Your achievement represents the successful culmination of the journey that began when you left your birth group as an uncertain adolescent. But success brings its own challenges, and the forest continues to test your abilities in new ways. Climate patterns are shifting, bringing longer dry seasons and more intense wet periods. Food tree populations are changing in response to these environmental pressures. Predator communities are adapting to altered prey availability. Your continued success depends on your ability to adapt to these changing conditions while maintaining the territorial and social relationships that form the foundation of your achievements. The cycle of life continues around you as your own offspring begin to mature and face the same challenges you once confronted. Some will succeed in establishing their own territories, while others will fail and disappear into the unforgiving wilderness. Your genetic legacy depends not just on producing offspring, but on providing them with the skills and knowledge they need to survive and reproduce in their turn. Your story as a successful territorial male represents just one possible outcome among many for a dispersing proboscis monkey. The forest is filled with the unmarked graves of males who attempted the same journey but failed to establish themselves successfully. Your achievement is a testament to a combination of skill, luck, determination, and the complex environmental and social factors that determine success or failure in the wild. But even successful males don't live forever, and the forest is already preparing for the next generation of territorial holders who will eventually replace you. Somewhere in the canopy, young males are watching your every move, learning from your successes and failures, preparing for their own attempts to claim a piece of this green paradise. The ancient cycle of dispersal, establishment, reproduction, and replacement continues, as it has for millions of years, as it will for millions more. Your dominance over this territory has lasted 8 years now, longer than most males manage to hold on to their claims. Your massive nose has become legendary among the local Proboscis monkey community. Researchers measure other males against your impressive proportions, and younger males study your vocal techniques, hoping to replicate your success. But time is catching up with you in ways that become harder to ignore each passing season. Your joints ache more than they used to, especially during the cold mornings when mist hangs heavy in the canopy. The effortless leaps between trees that once defined your daily existence now require more careful calculation, more conscious effort. You still make the jumps, but the margin for error has shrunk. Your reflexes aren't quite as sharp, your grip not quite as reliable, your recovery from minor injuries slower than it was in your prime. The younger males have noticed. They watch you more carefully now, testing your responses to territorial intrusions with increasing boldness. What once would have triggered immediate and overwhelming retaliation now sometimes gets a delayed response, as your aging body takes longer to mobilize. You're still dangerous, still capable of defending what's yours, but the aura of invincibility that once surrounded you has begun to fade. Your primary female companion has aged alongside you, her own movements becoming more deliberate, her foraging less energetic. She's given you 7 offspring over the years, a remarkable reproductive success that speaks to both your territorial quality and her maternal abilities. But her last pregnancy was difficult, and you both understand without discussing it that her childbearing years are probably over. The forest itself shows signs of change that go beyond normal seasonal variations. The rainfall patterns have shifted, bringing shorter wet seasons and longer dry periods that stress even the most resilient food trees. Some species that were abundant when you first claimed this territory have become scarce, while others have expanded their range in response to the changing conditions. Your mental map of resources requires constant revision as familiar landmarks disappear and new opportunities emerge. A particularly aggressive young male has been testing your boundaries for weeks now, pushing further into your territory each day before retreating when you respond. He's learned your patrol schedule, identified the times when you're most likely to be feeding rather than defending, and begun timing his incursions accordingly. His strategy shows intelligence and patience, qualities that remind you uncomfortably of your own approach when you were his age. The confrontation comes on a morning when your arthritis is particularly painful, slowing your response to his latest territorial violation. By the time you reach the disputed area, he's already established himself in one of your prime feeding trees, gorging on ripe fruit while calling out challenges that echo across the forest. His nose isn't as large as yours, but it's impressive for his age, and his calls carry the confidence of youth and ambition. Your threat display feels labored compared to the explosive power you once commanded. Your nose inflates properly, your calls maintain their deep resonance, but the intimidating presence that used to send challengers fleeing now seems somehow diminished. The young male notices these subtle changes, and his own display becomes more aggressive in response. The physical confrontation is brief but decisive. He's faster than you expected, stronger than you anticipated, and more experienced than most challengers his age. When he strikes, you're not quite quick enough to dodge completely. His blow sends you tumbling through the branches, and for a terrifying moment, you lose your grip entirely. Only decades of muscle memory save you from a fatal fall, as your hands automatically grab for purchase, even while your consciousness reels from the impact. You hit the ground hard, harder than you have in years. Pain shoots through your left shoulder, and something in your ribs feels wrong. The young male looms over you from the tree above, his victory calls drowning out the forest sounds around you. He doesn't need to attack again. You both know the outcome is decided. Your reign over this territory has ended not with a dramatic final battle, but with a simple demonstration that you're no longer strong enough to hold what you once claimed. The retreat is humiliating, but necessary. You drag yourself away from the confrontation, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through your injured body. Behind you, the victor begins marking your former territory with his own scent, erasing years of your presence with systematic efficiency. By evening, your calls will no longer echo from these trees. Your familiar feeding routes will belong to someone else. The territory that defined your adult identity has been stripped away in a matter of minutes. Your primary female companion makes her choice quickly and pragmatically. When the new territorial holder approaches her with courtship displays, she doesn't resist. Proboscis monkey females can't afford loyalty to defeated males. Their survival and that of their offspring depends on maintaining relationships with whoever controls the resources they need. You watch from a distance as she accepts his advances, understanding the logic, even as it cuts deeper than any physical wound. The other females follow suit over the next few days, transferring their allegiances to the new male with the casual efficiency of survivors. Your youngest offspring, still dependent on their mothers, become part of his extended family group. The older juveniles face their own choices, accept subordinate status under the new regime, or begin their own dispersal journeys earlier than planned. You find yourself truly alone for the first time since your initial dispersal decades ago. But this exile is different. You're not a young male full of potential seeking to establish yourself, but an aging former alpha with diminished capabilities and uncertain prospects. The forest that once seemed full of opportunities now appears filled with threats and obstacles that your younger self would have navigated easily. Food becomes a constant concern as you're forced to forage in marginal areas avoided by territorial males. The leaves you find are often tough and low in nutrition, the fruits overripe or partially spoiled. Your damaged shoulder makes climbing difficult, limiting your access to the choicest feeding spots in the upper canopy. Weight begins to drop from your frame as inadequate nutrition combines with the stress of displacement. Water access proves even more challenging than finding foods. The best sources are controlled by territorial males who chase you away aggressively whenever you approach. You're forced to drink from stagnant pools and temporary puddles that carry risks of parasites and disease. The clear, sweet stream water that you once took for granted becomes a distant memory. Your injuries heal slowly and incompletely. The shoulder maintains a persistent ache that worsens in cold weather, and your ribs never quite feel right when you take deep breaths. Small wounds that would have closed quickly in your prime now fester and take weeks to heal properly. Your body's ability to recover from damage has been compromised by age and stress. Sleep becomes fitful and anxious as you struggle to find safe resting spots outside established territories. The comfortable sleeping trees you used for years are now off limits, forcing you to settle for less secure locations that leave you vulnerable to both predators and weather. You wake frequently during the night, startled by sounds that your younger self would have ignored. Other displaced males occasionally cross your path, fellow exiles wandering the spaces between established territories. Some are young challengers who failed in their own takeover attempts, while others are aging former alphas like yourself. These encounters are usually brief and tense. There's little camaraderie among the dispossessed, only competition for the few resources available in the marginal areas where you're all forced to survive. The rainy season brings particular hardships as your arthritis worsens in the damp conditions. Moving through the wet canopy becomes treacherous when your joints are stiff and painful. You slip more often, miss grabs that would have been automatic in your prime, and find yourself taking increasingly dangerous risks just to reach basic necessities like food and shelter. A severe storm system moves through the area, bringing winds strong enough to snap mature trees and rain heavy enough to flood the forest floor. You hunker down in whatever shelter you can find, but your chosen refuge proves inadequate as water pours through gaps in the canopy above. By morning, you're soaked, shivering, and beginning to show signs of the respiratory infection that often follows exposure to prolonged cold and wet conditions. The cough starts as a minor irritation, but develops into a persistent hack that worsens over the following weeks. Your breathing becomes labored, especially during exertion, and you find yourself needing frequent rest breaks during even short journeys. The sound of your coughing carries through the forest, potentially alerting predators to your weakened condition. Food becomes even harder to find as your reduced mobility limits your foraging range. You're forced to rely increasingly on whatever you can reach from ground level or the lowest branches, often the poorest quality vegetation that other animals have already rejected. Your weight continues to drop as malnutrition compounds the effects of illness and injury. Your once magnificent nose, the feature that defined your identity and enabled your success, becomes a burden in your weakened state. The massive appendage requires energy to maintain and coordinate, energy that your failing body can barely spare. Its weight affects your balance when you're already struggling with coordination, and its size makes breathing more difficult when your respiratory system is already compromised. The approach of another dry season fills you with dread rather than the anticipation of easier travel that it once brought. Your body lacks the reserves to survive months of reduced food and water availability. The territorial males who control the best resources show no mercy to displaced competitors. If anything, they become more aggressive during lean times when every calorie counts. You encounter a group of researchers studying proboscis monkey populations in the area, the same team that once documented your territorial success. They recognize you despite your deteriorated condition, and their obvious concern confirms what you already know. You're dying. Their presence triggers memories of better times when you were a subject of scientific interest rather than pity. A young python appears near one of the water sources you've been using, coiled motionlessly around a branch just above the drinking spot. In your prime, you would have detected its presence immediately and found an alternative. Now, your diminished senses and desperate thirst lead you too close before you notice the danger. The snake doesn't strike. You're probably too large to be worthwhile prey, but the encounter shakes what little confidence you have left. Your cough worsens as the weeks pass, developing into fits that leave you gasping and dizzy. Blood appears in your sputum, a sign that the infection has progressed beyond your body's ability to fight it effectively. You find yourself sleeping more during the day, conserving energy that seems to drain away faster than you can replenish it through inadequate feeding. The forest's predator community has begun to take notice of your condition. Scavengers follow your trail more boldly now, waiting for the inevitable. A leopard shadows your movements for several days, maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly assessing your declining vitality. You're not quite helpless enough to be an easy kill, but you're approaching that threshold. Your movements become increasingly restricted to a small area near a reliable water source, the maximum range your failing body can manage. The territory you once controlled spanned miles. Now your world has shrunk to a few hundred yards of marginal forest where no healthy proboscis monkey would choose to live. It's a kingdom of the dying, ruled by necessity rather than strength. Former rivals occasionally pass through your reduced range, traveling between their own territories on business that no longer concerns you. Some ignore you entirely, while others pause to observe your condition with what might be curiosity or satisfaction. None offer assistance. In Proboscis Monkey Society, the fallen are forgotten quickly. A particularly violent coughing fit leaves you collapsed at the base of a tree, unable to summon the strength to climb to safety. You lie there as darkness falls, listening to the night sounds of a forest that has moved on without you. Somewhere in the distance, your replacement calls out territorial claims from trees you once considered your own. The sound carries clearly through the still air, a reminder of everything you've lost. Dawn brings no relief from your symptoms, and the effort required to stand and move to water feels almost insurmountable. Your body has begun the final phase of its decline, systems shutting down as disease and malnutrition take their inevitable toll. The end is approaching, and some part of you recognizes it, with a mixture of resignation and relief. Your last clear memory is of sunlight filtering through the canopy as you rest against the trunk of a strangler fig, the same species of tree where you spent countless hours during your territorial prime. The irony isn't lost on you. You're ending where you began, dependent on others for survival, reduced to the most basic needs of warmth and sustenance. The forest continues its eternal cycles around your failing body. Insects buzz through shafts of sunlight, birds call from invisible perches, and somewhere overhead, a family of proboscis monkeys moves through the canopy with the confident ease you once possessed. Life goes on, indifferent to individual struggles, focused only on the endless repetition of birth, growth, reproduction, and death that has driven evolution for millions of years. Your breathing becomes increasingly shallow as your body's systems begin their final shutdown. The pain that has been your constant companion for months gradually fades as consciousness dims. In your last moments, some primitive part of your brain registers the familiar sounds and smells of the rainforest home that shaped every day of your existence. The researchers find your body several days later, recognizing you by the distinctive scar pattern and the enormous nose that made you famous in their study population. They record the location and condition of your remains, adding another data point to their long-term research on proboscis monkey life history and population dynamics. Your genetic legacy lives on in the offspring scattered throughout the forest, some now approaching maturity themselves. A few carry the genes for exceptional nose development that made you so successful during your prime. Others inherited your intelligence, your territorial instincts, or your ability to navigate complex social relationships. In the grand scheme of proboscis monkey evolution, your individual story becomes part of the larger narrative of adaptation and survival. The territory you once controlled has been fully integrated into your successor's range, with no trace remaining of your years of dominance. The feeding trees continue to produce fruit, the water sources flow as reliably as ever, and the complex web of social relationships among the local proboscis monkey community has adjusted to accommodate the change in leadership. New challenges emerge for the current territorial holders as environmental pressures continue to intensify. Climate change brings more extreme weather patterns, human development encroaches on forest habitat, and disease outbreaks periodically devastate local populations. The skills and strategies that ensured your success may not be sufficient for the next generation of proboscis monkeys facing an increasingly uncertain future. But life adapts, as it always has. Young males continue to disperse from their birth groups, seeking territories and mates with the same determination you once showed. Females continue to evaluate potential partners based on their ability to provide resources and protection. The ancient patterns of proboscis monkey society persist despite individual tragedies and environmental challenges. Your story represents one possible trajectory among countless others in the ongoing saga of proboscis monkey existence. Some individuals achieve greater success, holding territories longer and producing more offspring. Others fail earlier, never establishing themselves successfully or losing their territories to younger challengers after only brief periods of dominance. A few transcend the normal patterns entirely, developing innovative strategies that reshape how their species adapts to changing conditions. The forest that witnessed your rise and fall continues to evolve, shaped by the countless interactions between the species that call it home. Trees grow and die, rivers change course, and animal populations rise and fall in response to environmental pressures and opportunities. Your individual contribution to this vast system was significant during your lifetime, but ultimately temporary, replaced by new actors playing out the same fundamental dramas of survival and reproduction. In the end, your life as a proboscis monkey was neither triumph nor tragedy, but simply one expression of the biological imperative that drives all living things. You succeeded in passing your genes to the next generation, defended resources that enabled others to survive, and played your role in the complex ecosystem that sustains proboscis monkey populations. That achievement, modest by human standards, but significant in evolutionary terms, represents the true measure of success in the natural world. The cycle continues, as it always has, as it always will, until the last proboscis monkey swings through the last tree in the last remaining patch of Borneo rainforest. Your story ends, but the species endures, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of millions of individual lives like yours, each contributing their small part to the grand experiment of life on Earth. Your death brings a brief pause to the forest's rhythm before life resumes its relentless pace. Within hours, the first scavengers arrive, flies drawn by scent, then beetles that burrow through decaying flesh with methodical efficiency. Your body becomes a temporary ecosystem, supporting dozens of species that depend on the nutrients you accumulated over decades of successful foraging. A young hornbill discovers your remains and tears away strips of flesh with its massive beak. The bird's calls attract others, and soon a small gathering of opportunists works to process what's left of your physical form. They don't mourn your passing or reflect on your achievements. They simply take what they need and move on, following the practical logic that governs all forest interactions. The strangler fig against which you died continues its own slow-motion battle for survival, gradually tightening its grip around the host tree that supports it. In a few decades, the host will die and rot away, leaving only the hollow shell of the fig to mark where two trees once stood. Your decomposing body provides a small boost of nutrients to this ancient struggle, your final contribution to the forest that shaped your entire existence. Within weeks, your soft tissues have been consumed or absorbed by the soil, leaving only your skeleton to mark where a dominant male once ruled several square miles of prime rainforest. Your skull, with its distinctive nasal bones that supported the massive nose which defined your identity, becomes a temporary shelter for small mammals and insects before it too begins to crumble under the assault of tropical weather and scavenging activity. The research team that documented your life includes your death in their long-term population study, noting the date, location, and apparent cause of your demise. Your case becomes part of a larger dataset examining how environmental pressures affect proboscis monkey survival rates. The scientists who once watched you defend territory and court females now use your mortality data to model population trends and predict future conservation needs. Your former territory has been fully absorbed into your successor's expanding domain. The young male who defeated you has proven himself a capable territorial holder, defending his enlarged range against multiple challengers while maintaining relationships with several females. His own nose continues growing, approaching the impressive proportions that once made you famous among researchers and neighboring males alike. But territorial success comes with its own pressures. The expanded range requires more energy to patrol effectively, leaving gaps that ambitious younger males probe constantly. Food resources that seemed abundant when divided between smaller territories now show signs of overuse as larger populations compete for the same limited supplies. Your successor faces challenges you never encountered during your prime years of dominance. Climate patterns continue shifting in ways that stress even the most adaptable forest ecosystems. The dry seasons grow longer and more severe, while wet periods bring increasingly violent storms that topple ancient trees and reshape familiar landscapes. Food trees that fruited reliably for generations begin failing, forcing proboscis monkey populations to adapt their foraging strategies or risk starvation. Human activity encroaches closer to proboscis monkey territories as palm oil plantations expand and logging operations push deeper into previously untouched forest. The sounds of chainsaws and heavy machinery intrude on the natural soundscape, creating stress that affects feeding patterns, mating behavior, and territorial stability. Some proboscis monkey groups abandon traditional ranges rather than cope with the constant disturbance. Disease outbreaks periodically sweep through local populations, taking advantage of the stress caused by environmental pressures and habitat fragmentation. Respiratory infections similar to the one that contributed to your death become more common as weakened immune systems struggle to cope with novel pathogens. Entire family groups sometimes disappear within weeks, leaving vacant territories that attract desperate competitors from overcrowded areas. Your offspring face these challenges with varying degrees of success. Several have reached maturity and begun their own territorial quests, carrying genetic traits that once made you formidable. A son inherited your intelligence and strategic thinking, allowing him to establish territory through negotiation rather than violence. A daughter displays the same careful evaluation of potential mates that characterized your primary female companion. But genetics provides no guarantee of success in a changing world. Environmental pressures that didn't exist during your lifetime now test adaptive strategies that evolved over millions of years. Some of your descendants thrive by developing innovative responses to novel challenges, while others cling to traditional approaches that prove inadequate for current conditions. The proboscis monkey community you once dominated has fragmented into smaller, more isolated groups as habitat destruction eliminates the corridors that once connected different populations. Genetic diversity decreases as breeding opportunities become limited, reducing the species' ability to adapt to future environmental changes. The complex social networks that once spanned vast areas of forest now exist only in scattered fragments. Research priorities shift as scientists recognize that studying individual behavior and territorial dynamics matters less than understanding how entire populations respond to existential threats. The detailed observations of your life that once seemed academically interesting now provide crucial baseline data for conservation efforts attempting to preserve what remains of proboscis monkey habitat. Conservation groups use your story and others like it to illustrate what's being lost as Borneo's rainforests disappear. Your image, captured during your territorial prime, with your magnificent nose displayed in a threat posture, appears in fundraising materials and educational presentations around the world. In death, you become a symbol of a species struggling for survival in an increasingly hostile environment. Protected reserves are established in areas that once formed part of your extended range, but these islands of preserved habitat face their own challenges. Edge effects alter forest conditions near boundaries, making interior areas less suitable for species that evolved in continuous canopy environments. Small populations become vulnerable to genetic bottlenecks and random catastrophes that wouldn't threaten larger groups. The strangler fig that sheltered your final hours eventually completes its conquest of its host tree, standing hollow but triumphant as a monument to patience and persistence. Small mammals nest in the cavities where you once rested, and insects colonize the bark where your scent marks once proclaimed territorial ownership. The tree remembers nothing of your presence, but it benefits from the nutrients your decomposition provided. Your primary female companion survived several more years after your death, adapting to life under new territorial leadership with the pragmatic flexibility that characterizes successful proboscis monkey females. She produced 2 more offspring before age finally ended her reproductive career. Her death received no scientific documentation. Female mortality attracts less research attention than the dramatic territorial conflicts between males. The water sources you once controlled continue flowing through the forest, supporting whatever proboscis monkeys remain in the area. The streams show increasing signs of contamination from upstream agricultural activity, but the animals that depend on them have few alternatives. Adaptation becomes a matter of tolerating degraded conditions rather than thriving in optimal habitat. Food trees that sustained your territorial success for nearly a decade face their own mortality as age, disease, and environmental stress take their toll. Some species that were abundant during your lifetime have become rare, while others have disappeared entirely from areas where they once grew prolifically. The forest composition shifts as climate change favors different plant communities. Younger researchers studying current proboscis monkey populations Sometimes discover your old territorial markers, scent traces that persist in protected bark crevices, worn spots on branches where you once slept, or feeding signs that indicate past usage patterns. These archaeological remnants of your life provide insights into how proboscis monkey behavior has changed in response to environmental pressures. The territorial system that once provided stability for proboscis monkey communities becomes increasingly disrupted as habitat fragmentation makes traditional ranging patterns impossible. Males who would once have established separate territories are forced to compress into smaller areas, leading to increased conflict and social instability. The carefully negotiated boundaries that prevented violence during your era give way to more frequent and more serious confrontations. Mating systems also show signs of change as altered sex ratios and reduced population densities affect traditional courtship patterns. Females have fewer males to choose from, reducing their ability to select for genetic quality and territorial competence. Males face less competition for mates, but also have fewer opportunities to demonstrate their fitness through territorial success. The research station that monitored your population faces funding cuts as conservation priorities shift toward more critically endangered species. Long-term studies that might have tracked your descendants through multiple generations are terminated, leaving gaps in scientific understanding just when comprehensive data becomes most crucial for effective conservation planning. Tourism operations that once brought visitors to observe proboscis monkeys in their natural habitat struggle as populations decline and become more difficult to locate reliably. The economic incentives that made forest preservation profitable for local communities disappear along with the animals that attracted paying visitors. Land use decisions increasingly favor short-term extraction over long-term conservation. Your genetic legacy becomes diluted through successive generations as your descendants interbreed it with unrelated individuals. But traces of your distinctive traits persist in the surviving population. Researchers occasionally identify individuals whose nose development or behavioral patterns suggest descent from successful territorial males like yourself. These genetic echoes provide hope that adaptive traits can survive even as overall populations decline. The forest soundscape changes as Proboscis monkey calls become less frequent and less complex. The morning chorus that once included dozens of males announcing their territorial claims now features only scattered individuals whose voices echo unanswered through increasingly empty canopy. The silence that fills these acoustic gaps represents more than just reduced numbers. It signals the breakdown of social systems that evolved over millions of years. Climate change accelerates, bringing weather patterns that exceed the adaptive capacity of species that evolved under more stable conditions. Extreme temperatures stress proboscis monkeys beyond their physiological limits, while unpredictable rainfall disrupts the seasonal cycles that govern feeding and reproduction. The environmental predictability that allowed your territorial strategy to succeed becomes a relic of the past. Palm oil plantations expand to fill areas where proboscis monkey territories once provided buffer zones between human and natural systems. The monoculture crops that replace diverse forest ecosystems support few native species and create biological deserts that fragment remaining habitat into isolated patches. The corridors that once allowed genetic exchange between populations disappear under geometric rows of identical plants. International conservation efforts attempt to preserve critical habitat through protected area designation and sustainable development programs, but political instability and economic pressures limit their effectiveness. The forests that supported your population become bargaining chips in complex negotiations between conservation organizations, government agencies, and commercial interests with very different priorities. Local communities that once coexisted with proboscis monkey populations find their traditional relationships with forest ecosystems disrupted by outside economic pressures. Subsistence hunting and gathering practices that were sustainable for generations become impossible as animal populations crash and plant communities collapse. The indigenous knowledge that helped maintain ecological balance for centuries becomes irrelevant in rapidly changing environments. Captive breeding programs attempt to preserve proboscis monkey genetics in artificial environments, but the complex social and ecological requirements that shaped your species prove difficult to replicate in managed settings. Animals born in captivity lack the territorial instincts, foraging skills, and social knowledge that allowed you to thrive in natural conditions. Reintroduction. Efforts face enormous challenges in preparing captive bred individuals for release into degraded wild habitats. The scientific papers that documented your life and death become historical documents rather than current research as the populations they described disappear or change beyond recognition. Your individual story, once part of a larger narrative about proboscis monkey social dynamics and territorial behavior, becomes a nostalgic glimpse of ecosystems that no longer exist in their original form. Technology advances that might have provided new insights into proboscis monkey behavior and ecology arrive too late to study intact populations. GPS tracking systems, genetic analysis techniques, and remote monitoring equipment become tools for documenting decline rather than understanding natural behavior. The questions that motivated researchers during your lifetime become moot as the subjects of study vanish. Museum specimens preserve physical evidence of your species' former diversity and abundance, but these static displays cannot capture the dynamic interactions that characterized living proboscis monkey communities. The vocalizations that once carried for miles through intact forest canopy exist now only as digital recordings played for visitors who will never experience the real thing. Educational programs use your story to teach children about extinction and conservation, but the lessons feel abstract to generations growing up in a world where proboscis monkeys exist primarily in photographs and videos. The complex ecological relationships that supported your territorial success become simplified into moral tales about human responsibility and environmental protection. Your death, once an unremarkable event in the natural cycle of forest life, takes on symbolic significance as part of a species-wide decline that represents one of the great biological tragedies of the modern era. The individual struggles that defined your existence become part of a larger narrative about humanity's relationship with the natural world and the consequences of environmental destruction. But even as your species faces an uncertain future, life continues to find ways to persist and adapt. Some proboscis monkey populations develop behavioral modifications that allow them to survive in degraded habitats. Others retreat to remote areas where human influence remains minimal. The evolutionary processes that shaped your ancestors continue operating, though under vastly different selection pressures than those that molded your own development. The forest that witnessed your birth, territorial success, and death continues evolving in response to changing conditions. New species colonize disturbed areas, while others retreat to increasingly isolated refugia. The ecosystem that supported complex proboscis monkey societies becomes something different, simplified, fragmented, but still alive in ways that honor the biological legacy you helped create. Your story ends, but the larger story of life on Earth continues, shaped by the accumulated choices of billions of individual organisms responding to environmental challenges and opportunities. The genes you pass to future generations carry forward the evolutionary wisdom accumulated over millions of years of primate evolution, even as the specific ecological context that allowed your success disappears. In the end, your existence as a proboscis monkey represents both triumph and tragedy. Triumph in your individual success at surviving, reproducing, and contributing to the ongoing experiment of life, and tragedy in being part of a species whose time on Earth may be drawing to a close through no fault of its own. Your legacy lives on in the genetic material of your descendants, the scientific knowledge gained from studying your behavior, and the symbolic power of your story to inspire conservation efforts that might yet preserve something of the world you knew. The ancient rhythms of birth, growth, reproduction, and death that governed your life continue operating even as the specific forms they take change in response to environmental pressures. Life adapts, as it always has, finding new ways to persist in changing conditions while carrying forward the essential information that connects each generation to its evolutionary past and potential future. The last proboscis monkey falls from a tree in the early morning light, its massive nose catching briefly on a branch before the body tumbles 40 feet to the forest floor below. There's no ceremony, no final call echoing through the canopy, no recognition from the few remaining forest creatures that something irreplaceable has just disappeared forever. A palm oil plantation worker finds the remains 3 days later while surveying the boundary between cultivated rows and what used to be wilderness. He takes a photo with his phone, not out of scientific interest, but because the enormous nose looks amusing even in death. The image gets shared on social media with a laughing emoji and a caption about weird jungle animals. The worker doesn't know he's looking at the end of 4 million years of evolution. He doesn't understand that this grotesque appendage once amplified calls that could be heard for miles, that it served as both a weapon and a tool for survival in one of the world's most complex ecosystems. To him, it's just another dead monkey, slightly more ridiculous looking than most. The body disappears within a week, consumed by the few scavengers that still inhabit the degraded forest edge. Flies lay their eggs in the decaying flesh. Beetles burrow through what remains, and within a month, only scattered bones mark where the last representative of an entire species once lay. Even these remnants are soon scattered by rain and wind, leaving no trace that proboscis monkeys ever existed. The scientific community reacts with the predictable mixture of outrage and resignation that accompanies each new addition to the growing list of extinct species. Research papers are published documenting the decline, conferences are held to discuss what went wrong, and funding proposals are submitted to study what can be learned from the loss. But the academic response feels hollow when the subject of study no longer exists. Conservation organizations update their websites, removing proboscis monkeys from endangered species lists and adding them to the growing catalog of recent extinctions. Fundraising campaigns that once featured dramatic images of males displaying their enormous noses are quietly retired, replaced by appeals for species that still have a chance at survival. The marketing departments understand that people don't donate money to save animals that are already gone. Museum curators carefully preserve the few specimens in their collections, knowing these lifeless forms represent all that remains of a species that once numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Children on school trips will study these displays to learn about extinction and conservation, but they'll never experience the shock of encountering a living proboscis monkey in its natural habitat. The bizarre appearance, the haunting calls, the complex social dynamics that made these animals so fascinating to observe. The forests of Borneo continue shrinking as palm oil plantations expand into the last remaining patches of habitat. Without proboscis monkeys to disperse seeds and maintain the complex ecological relationships they participated in for millennia, the forest structure begins changing in subtle but significant ways. Certain tree species become more common while others decline, creating a cascade of effects that ripple through the entire ecosystem. Local communities that once coexisted with proboscis monkey populations adjust to their absence with the practical resignation of people who have witnessed many changes in their lifetimes. Elders remember when the forest was full of calls from different primate species, but younger generations grow up in a quieter world where such sounds exist only in old recordings and documentary films. The research stations that once monitored proboscis monkey behavior are repurposed for studying other species or abandoned entirely as funding priorities shift toward more pressing conservation needs. The detailed behavioral observations that documented territorial disputes, mating rituals, and social hierarchies become historical curiosities rather than active areas of scientific inquiry. Ecotourism operations that relied on proboscis monkey sightings to attract visitors struggle to remain viable. Tour guides who once specialized in tracking family groups through the canopy retrain to focus on other attractions, but nothing quite replaces the unique appeal of encountering these bizarre-looking primates in their natural environment. Revenue streams that once provided economic incentives for forest preservation dry up along with the animals that generated them. The complex vocal communication system that proboscis monkeys use to coordinate group movements and establish territorial boundaries disappears with the last individual. The acoustic landscape of Borneo's forests becomes permanently impoverished, missing the deep honking calls that once provided a distinctive soundtrack to life in the rainforest canopy. Genetic material preserved in frozen tissue samples represents the only remaining possibility for future resurrection efforts, but the technology to recreate extinct species remains largely theoretical. Even if proboscis monkeys could somehow be brought back to life, the habitat they evolved to exploit no longer exists in sufficient quantity or quality to support viable populations. The pharmaceutical industry quietly writes off potential discoveries that might have emerged from studying proboscis monkey physiology and biochemistry. The unique adaptations that allowed these animals to digest toxic leaves and survive in challenging environments contained secrets that will never be unlocked now that the living examples have disappeared. Indigenous knowledge about proboscis monkey behavior and ecology dies with the elders who possessed it, as younger generations find such information irrelevant in a world where these animals no longer exist. Traditional stories and cultural practices that incorporated proboscis monkeys become incomprehensible to people who have never seen the creatures they reference. Climate change continues accelerating, creating environmental conditions that would have challenged proboscis monkey populations, even if habitat destruction hadn't already driven them to extinction. The species might not have survived the coming decades anyway, but their premature disappearance means we'll never know how they might have adapted to changing conditions. Other primate species in Southeast Asia face similar pressures, and proboscis monkey extinction serves as a preview of losses to come. Orangutans, gibbons, and various macaque species struggle with shrinking habitats and human encroachment, their populations following the same downward trajectory that eliminated their proboscis-nosed relatives. The palm oil industry continues expanding, driven by global demand for products that require this versatile ingredient. Consumers purchasing everything from chocolate to cosmetics rarely consider the connection between their choices and the destruction of irreplaceable ecosystems. The economic forces that drove proboscis monkey extinction remain firmly in place, threatening whatever biodiversity still survives. International conservation agreements and protected area designations prove inadequate to preserve species facing the combined pressures of habitat loss, climate change, and human population growth. The legal frameworks designed to prevent extinctions like this one lack the enforcement mechanisms and political support necessary to be effective against determined economic interests. Future generations will study proboscis monkey extinction as a classic example of how human activity can eliminate species faster than they can adapt to changing conditions. The case will appear in textbooks alongside other conservation failures, serving as a cautionary tale about the consequences of prioritizing short-term economic gains over long-term ecological stability. The internet preserves thousands of images and videos of proboscis monkeys, creating a digital archive that documents their appearance and behavior for posterity. These electronic ghosts provide a haunting reminder of what's been lost, but they cannot capture the full reality of encountering these remarkable animals in their natural environment. Zoos around the world remove proboscis monkey exhibits, replacing them with species that still exist in the wild. The artificial habitats that once housed captive individuals become homes for other endangered primates, but nothing quite fills the gap left by these uniquely bizarre creatures. Children's books that featured proboscis monkeys as characters in stories about rainforest conservation become outdated, their environmental messages complicated by the fact that the animals they celebrate no longer exist. Publishers quietly let such titles go out of print, replacing them with books about species that still have a chance at survival. Scientific conferences dedicated to primate conservation devote sessions to analyzing what went wrong with proboscis monkey protection efforts, hoping to learn lessons that might help save other endangered species. The discussions are thorough and well-intentioned, but they cannot change the fundamental economic and political forces that drove the extinction. The strangler figs that once provided sleeping sites for proboscis monkey families continue their ancient struggle for survival, gradually killing their host trees through patient persistence. These plants evolved alongside the primates that are now gone, and their relationship represented millions of years of coevolution that has been permanently severed. Insect species that depended on proboscis monkeys for seed dispersal or other ecological services face their own population declines as their partner species disappears. The extinction creates a cascade of secondary effects that ripple through the ecosystem, eliminating species whose dependence on proboscis monkeys was never fully understood. The morning calls that once announced territorial boundaries and coordinated group movements are replaced by the sounds of machinery clearing forest for agricultural development. Chainsaws and bulldozers provide the new soundtrack for areas that once echoed with primate vocalizations, marking the transformation from natural ecosystem to human-dominated landscape. Research funding that once supported proboscis monkey studies is redirected toward other conservation priorities, but the scientific community struggles with the knowledge that each species lost represents irreplaceable information about evolution, ecology, and adaptation. The extinction eliminates not just the animals themselves, but entire research programs and career paths built around studying them. Environmental organizations face the challenge of maintaining public interest and support in the face of mounting conservation failures. Proboscis monkey extinction joins a growing list of species lost during the current mass extinction event, creating a sense of hopelessness that makes fundraising and advocacy increasingly difficult. The unique adaptations that allowed proboscis monkeys to thrive in mangrove environments are lost forever, along with any insights they might have provided about surviving in challenging ecological conditions. The specialized digestive system that processed toxic leaves, the enlarged nose that amplified vocalizations, and the complex social behaviors that maintained group cohesion represent evolutionary solutions that took millions of years to develop and can never be recovered. Tourism brochures for Borneo remove references to proboscis monkey viewing opportunities, acknowledging the reality that visitors can no longer expect to encounter these remarkable animals in the wild. The tourism industry adapts by promoting other attractions, but nothing quite replaces the unique appeal of observing primates with such bizarre and distinctive features. Documentary filmmakers scramble to edit existing footage into memorial pieces that celebrate proboscis monkeys while lamenting their loss. These productions serve as digital monuments to a vanished species, but they also highlight the inadequacy of video recordings to capture the full experience of sharing the forest with living, breathing animals. The bacterial communities that evolved in proboscis monkey digestive systems to break down toxic plant compounds disappear along with their hosts, eliminating unique microorganisms that might have had applications in biotechnology or medicine. The extinction represents not just the loss of one species, but the elimination of entire ecosystems of microscopic life. Local governments in Borneo issue statements expressing regret about proboscis monkey extinction while continuing to approve development projects that destroy what remains of their former habitat. The political rhetoric about conservation rarely translates into meaningful action when economic interests conflict with environmental protection. International media coverage of the extinction follows predictable patterns: initial shock and outrage, followed by detailed analysis of contributing factors, then gradual fading of public attention as other news stories dominate headlines. The brief spike in awareness changes few minds and influences fewer policies. The last photograph of a living proboscis monkey, taken by a camera trap just days before the species' extinction, becomes an iconic image symbolizing humanity's relationship with the natural world. The animal's distinctive profile, captured in grainy detail as it moved through degraded forest habitat, serves as a haunting reminder of what careless stewardship can cost. Museum curators debate how to display their proboscis monkey specimens, whether to emphasize the animal's biological uniqueness or focus on the human actions that led to their extinction. The exhibits become memorials rather than educational tools, serving more to commemorate loss than to inspire conservation action. The economic analysis of proboscis monkey extinction reveals the stark mathematics of modern conservation. The short-term profits from palm oil production far exceeded any financial benefits that might have come from preserving the species and their habitat. The market failure that drove their extinction illustrates the fundamental challenge facing conservation efforts worldwide. Geneticists working with preserved tissue samples discover unique sequences in proboscis monkey DNA that might have provided insights into primate evolution and adaptation, but the research becomes academic rather than practical without living subjects to study. The genetic information joins growing databases of extinct species, serving primarily as a record of what has been lost. The silence that settles over former proboscis monkey territories reflects more than just the absence of their distinctive calls. It represents the breakdown of acoustic communication networks that once connected individuals across miles of forest. The soundscape of Borneo becomes permanently impoverished, missing a key component of its natural audio environment. Artificial intelligence systems, trained on recordings of proboscis monkey vocalizations, can still generate synthetic versions of their calls, but these digital ghosts serve only to emphasize the absence of the real thing. The technology preserves the sound without the meaning, the acoustics without the social context that gave them significance. And so the story ends, not with the dramatic final battle of a territorial dispute or the peaceful death of an aged patriarch, but with bureaucratic updates to species databases and the quiet removal of exhibits from natural history museums. Proboscis monkeys disappear from the world with a whimper rather than a roar, their extinction marked more by silence than by ceremony. The great experiment that began millions of years ago, when the first primates developed the enlarged nasal structures that would define their species, concludes in a palm oil plantation worker's smartphone photo. 4 million years of evolution, countless generations of survival and adaptation, and the complex social structures that sustain proboscis monkey communities through ice ages and climate shifts, all of it reduced to a momentary curiosity shared on social media before being forgotten in the endless scroll of digital content. Your life as a proboscis monkey might have been rough, but there's no animal out there that has it worse now. Trust me, they're all gone, and there's no video to check out next because the story is over. The forest is quiet. The trees stand empty, and somewhere in a museum display case, behind glass that will never again fog with the breath of a living proboscis monkey, the last evidence of your species stares out at visitors with glassy eyes that will never again reflect the green light of a Borneo sunrise.